Welcome to this explainer. We all know that one person, right? The one who would literally rather drag a heavy couch up 3 flights of stairs entirely by themselves than just ask for a hand. Have you ever wondered why some people absolutely insist on doing everything alone, even when they are so clearly overwhelmed? Usually we look at them and think, wow, incredible work ethic, or maybe we just think they're being a bit stubborn. But our source material today reveals something completely fascinating. Refusing help? It's rarely about capability. Instead, it's about an invisible psychological shield. Today, we're going to break down the hidden psychology of hyperindependence, using our sources to uncover exactly why some overwhelmed folks stubbornly refuse a lifeline.
I've got it. I want you to picture a colleague, a friend, or honestly, maybe even yourself. Someone who is absolutely drowning in tasks, deadlines, or personal struggles. Yet, the very second you offer to help, they reflexively pull away and drop those 3 words. Now, to an outside observer, this looks like extreme competence, or maybe a fierce need for control. But underneath, something entirely different is going on.
Which brings us to a really crucial question. Why on earth does the brain treat help as a threat rather than a solution? The paradigm shift we have to make today is understanding that this behavior has nothing to do with actually being capable. According to our sources, it's an invisible psychological shield, and it is specifically designed to hide a very fragile sense of identity. By refusing help, the brain is actually just trying to protect itself from deep-seated vulnerabilities.
Let's dive right into our first layer, the hyper-independence trap, and how it hides the need for connection. Psychology tells us that fundamentally human beings are deeply social creatures. We absolutely require love, support, and understanding from other people. But for the hyper-independent person, admitting that deep-seated need feels incredibly uncomfortable. And let's be real, it feels socially risky. So to protect that vulnerability, they throw up a mask of busyness. They hide their reliance on others behind a massive wall of constant tasks. The fundamental human need for connection is still there, but they just stay endlessly busy to make absolutely sure nobody ever gets close enough to see it. It's essentially a protection mechanism. They actually view their independence as a form of social control. Think about it. By ensuring they are always the provider of help and literally never the recipient, they control the entire narrative. To them, appearing entirely self-sufficient just feels a whole lot safer than appearing needy. That leads us into our second psychological layer, identity and familiar safety. This is where we mistake needing help for a fundamental flaw. For someone caught in this trap, a temporary struggle or a crazy workload isn't just a bad day at the office. They internalize the whole thing. Notice the stark contrast in the internal dialogue here. A healthy, objective assessment is just, hey, this task is difficult. But the hyper-independent brain falls into a super dangerous trap, shifting instead to, I am not good enough, or even, I am a mistake. Psychologically, they're attaching the need for assistance directly to their own identity. They treat a simple request for help as a total, catastrophic personal failure.
Now, to understand why anyone would willingly choose to suffer through that, we have to look at a psychological principle called the mere exposure effect. Basically, the human brain often values familiarity way more than it values happiness. It's kind of like wearing a worn-out, super uncomfortable pair of shoes just because you're used to how they fit. If someone has spent years being the reliable one who handles literally everything, that role just becomes their familiar identity, and the more they live that way, the more comfortable the pure exhaustion actually feels.
Just look at the lone achiever setup here. Yes, they might be completely, utterly burned out, but that burnout, it's predictable. It is a safe, known quantity. Contrast that with relying on others. Even though getting help offers relief, the brain codes it as an unknown risk. For the hyper-independent person, the predictable safety of doing it all alone is always going to win out over the terrifying unpredictability of actually trusting someone else.
Let's move along to our third layer, rejection as a social risk. This is where it becomes the ultimate shield.
For a lot of these individuals, the core driver of their behavior isn't pride at all, it's intense fear. I want you to imagine a twisted mental scale actively weighing 2 things. On one side, you have the sheer terror of asking for help and being told no. And on the other side, the physical and mental pain of just doing the work themselves. The nervous system actually treats that potential social rejection as a vastly greater danger than the actual crushing stress of the workload. So the crucial takeaway here is this simple, unbreakable equation. Avoidance equals 0 disappointment. By simply never putting themselves out there to ask for help, they guarantee with 100% certainty that they will never be rejected. They ensure they can never be let down by anyone. It is, quite frankly, a perfect, impenetrable defense mechanism against social pain. But this builds into a totally exhausting internal state. We are now at the absolute core of the onion, paralysis by overanalysis, driven by the metacognitive loop. Highly analytical people will completely sabotage their own chances for relief before they even speak a single word, and they do it through something called metacognition. This is simply the act of thinking about your own thinking. It's this wild internal feedback loop. And highly analytical people engage in this to a degree that becomes completely paralyzing. Before they even entertain the idea of reaching out for support, they run through a rigorous, exhausting simulation in their own minds.
That metacognitive loop almost always starts with this intrusive, anxious thought. Will I look weak? They immediately start analyzing how their request is going to be perceived by their colleague or their loved one. They panic that the mask of total competence is going to slip, and they'll be harshly judged for not being able to handle it all.
Then, if they somehow get past that first hurdle, the fear escalates really quickly to, am I being a burden? Now they're overanalyzing their impact on the other person. They imagine the inconvenience they might cause, projecting their own crazy stress onto someone else, and basically feeling intensely guilty before they've even asked the question. And finally, it culminates in this completely paralyzing social anxiety. What will they think of me? They replay the scenario over and over and over, trying to predict the exact social fallout of asking for a simple favor. By the time they've finished this looping internal monologue, their energy is just completely depleted. Which leads to a pretty brutal conclusion. All that metacognitive overthinking, analyzing the social risks, fearing the rejection, it creates a crushing amount of mental pressure. Eventually, their brain decides that dealing with that massive mental knot is far more exhausting than simply putting their head down and pushing the heavy boulder up the hill themselves. The overthinking makes the simple act of asking for help feel impossibly heavy. As we bring all these layers together, we enter our final section, dropping the invisible shield and reevaluating our everyday actions. When you really understand the deeper patterns of the human mind, you see that stubbornly refusing help is almost never about the specific tasks sitting on someone's desk. It is a complex architecture of self-protection. Let's summarize exactly what this shield is actually doing. It hides our fundamental need for connection. It protects a fragile identity by preventing us from feeling like a failure. It relies on the mere exposure effect, literally choosing predictable exhaustion. It actively avoids the sting of rejection. And finally, it is entirely driven by a paralyzing cycle of overanalysis. Understanding these sources allows us to really reevaluate the deeper, hidden reasons behind our own daily habits. So I want to ask you, are you staying overwhelmingly busy just to avoid feeling exposed? Are you holding on to exhaustion because it somehow feels safer than trusting someone else with your burden? What is your invisible shield protecting you from right now? Once you understand the deeper reasons why people act the way they do, you'll begin noticing these hidden patterns absolutely everywhere. If you enjoyed learning how to read between the lines of human behavior in this explainer, make sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for joining me to explore the invisible shield of hyper-independence, and I will see you in the next one.